Well, hello and welcome back to another week on my allotment. You find me up here today, Friday morning. You can hear the traffic behind me, I think. It's the rush hour. Yeah, you find me up here with a stinking cold. I rarely get colds, but this is a real beaut. I think I'm rather annoying Cheryl at night because apparently, I have had 2 restless nights sleep because of it with a runny nose. Yeah, my heavy breathing and wheezing, and it's not the sexy kind of heavy breathing, it's the I wish you'd go in the spare room kind of heavy breathing, but there's someone in there at the moment so I can't. Anyway, yeah, welcome along. I haven't got a great deal to do up here today. I'm going to show you in a second that the plot is pretty much on the ball. And I think, every now and again at home I get the itch to sow something. So, I've sowed tomatoes now. Terry, one of my mates on the plot here, very cleverly suggested to me I might like to sow his Italian plum tomato seeds. And then I can have some, thanks Terry, and then he can have the rest. So I don't know how that happened. So I've done that, Terry. They're in the kitchen. They haven't stuck their heads up yet, but let's keep our fingers crossed. So yeah, I haven't got a great deal to do up here today. I'm going to sow some radish in the raised bed, and I'm going to sow some calendulas. And I found them in the bottom of my seed tin. So I thought, well, let's give them a go because I think that's one of the things I'll grow on the plot. They're fairly self-contained. And they're quite bright coloured, so they provide a bit of colour in the summer. So I've got those 2 things today. I've got to break up another small pallet, pardon me, because John needs some wood to brace one of his frames, and I said I've got some wood, I'll give you a hand with that. So I've got that to do first thing, and that's really it. We're away down visiting my parents tomorrow, taking my eldest son, who they haven't seen for 3 years. We're going down with him and his family. So that'll be nice, and then I'll be back up here Sunday. So I'm sure whatever happens Sunday, that'll be included in today's video. So welcome along. The first thing I'm going to do is make a cup of coffee, and as with all men with colds, I'm going to sit in there and drink it and feel sorry for myself. Well, I hope you'll excuse me for my indulgence and my sniffing, but I know I did a brief plot tour on my last video, but I've done quite a bit of work this week on the plot, and I wanted to take a quick snapshot of it right now because we have some really heavy rain coming today. I don't know how long I'll be up here, but I've forked over lightly every single bed, and this is a classic example of where I forked it. You can see here it's slightly higher than it is down there, so this soil here, because it's now sort of crumbly and it's been forked over, it's drying out, whereas the deeper stuff in the far end is a little more sodden and will take longer. And like I say, today today will ruin all that, but that's the nature of March. And here right now, with every bed forked over and no dig, that one, this one, the raspberry bed, obviously can't dig that, and then the one beyond it, they're all, oh, did I point this one out here? They're all no dig this year. I've top dressed them with about 2 to 4 inches of leaf mould and or allotment compost, and now that the daffs are out genuinely in all their glory and everything's repainted had another coat, even the flagpole. I tried to unscrew it yesterday so I could paint it on the ground, and it was having none of it. Those screws are really tight in. So I got the ladder out of my van and I was stood up at the very top of that pole giving it a lick of paint. That would have made superb video if I'd have come a cropper there. Anyway, it's all painted and it's all looking tickety-boo. So I hope you'll excuse my indulgence. Please excuse the rather smoky Kelly kettle. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, the latest word nonsense is, and I don't know who they are, you never know who they are, but they are changing the name of the gypsy moth to the spongy moth, because apparently gypsy moth might be seen as derogatory. What utter drivel. But you know, as I said, I've just got to maintain a sense of humour about it. And you know, if I ever encounter a gypsy moth, I will continue to call it a gypsy moth, because I fail to see how that's derogatory to anybody. Yeah, and just one little funny story. Let me just bring you up, because you're missing my wonderful face. That's better. I recalled a story when talking to my son last night. He sort of prompted the memory in me. I was on a course many years ago as a young man in the army. It was a selection course, not the obvious one, and I won't say any more than that because it doesn't really matter. But a lot of the course was about observation. The job you were going to do was all about collecting information and observing and recording things. So I was out in Germany at the time, so I went on a 2-day weekend aptitude, so they could have a look at you and you could have a look at them. Kettle's boiled. With a view to going on to the full 6-month course. And so yeah, while you were there, you're running along in a squad, and they'd say, what was that you saw on the left-hand side, and what was the registration number of the car we just passed, and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, we had this period of admin where we all sat in this waiting room, and in turn we were called out into the corridor where there was a female soldier who placed us against a wall and took our photograph for their board, and then we went into another room for an interview. Anyway, I went out in my turn, and this young, rather attractive woman, and the reason I say that will become apparent in a second. It's not me being sexist, God forbid. And anyway, she had a couple of buttons undone there, I happened to notice, like you do, and she was a how do I put this in today's oversensitive society? She was well built. Very attractive woman with quite a lot of cleavage. Anyway, so I stood there. She said, stare forward, don't smile. Okay. Took my photograph, and in I went. And they sat me down and they said, right, the first thing we'd like you to do is describe the woman that's just taken your photograph. And I had to write it down, you know, and it said hair colour, eye colour, height, build, any distinguishing marks. Well, I saw a couple, but you know, that's so bloody obvious, isn't it, what they were doing? And yet I couldn't record I didn't even remember what colour her hair was, to my eternal shame. Oh, you know, you got, I mean, when I look back now as an older man, you know, what a stupid man I was. But when we all got out later that evening, you weren't supposed to talk about the course, but inevitably we all did. Thankfully, I was not alone. There were many other men who said, you know, yeah, I don't remember a thing about, well, you know. Anyway, mildly funny, if you're allowed to laugh about those kind of things nowadays. And if that's all a bit too much for you, I suggest you go elsewhere, because it's only going to get worse. But yeah, I had to laugh. Right. If you have an allotment and you don't own a Kelly kettle, I can thoroughly recommend them. I've had this one for years. It's been on all my canoeing trips. He's been to Canada several times, where you use twigs and branches and things. They're a wonderful bit of kit. Oh. Cheers. While 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5 8s are 40. While I fill these 40 cute little pots, I thought I would regale you with my other mildly interesting little story. It's not much of one, but it's all I've got left. And that is that was I out the army? I should have got these facts right before I told you the story. Yeah, I think I was just out. I just left the army after 30 years, man and boy. And my youngest son, Daniel, went through the army selection process and wanted to join the Royal Engineers like his father did. And what they do nowadays is, rather than what I did, went to a college for Royal Engineer boy soldiers, it's really to do with budgets, but it does make a certain amount of sense. Whether you're joining the infantry or the signals or the Royal Engineers, whatever, they come together at what's called a phase 1 camp, where everyone does the same common military syllabus, and then they send them off to Catterick or to Chatham or wherever to do their specific training for their cap badge. So he went to a place called Basingbourne. It was the camp used to film that American film Full Metal Jacket, oddly. Anyway, when we were getting close to the place, I said to Daniel, look, this is going to be tough. It's hard work. There's no easy way around it. You're going to have to get stuck in. And after 30 years in the military, I had a certain reputation. A lot of it was to do with my professionalism and so on. A lot of it was to do with the fact that I didn't suffer fools and was quite harsh. And I'd got a certain unfortunate reputation for a disciplinarian. So some people had fallen foul of me, shall we say. So this compost has got a lot of this in it, twigs. So anyway, as we were nearing the camp, and me and his mum were in the car, and Daniel, I said, look, Daniel, the key to getting through this as easy as possible is what they call stay the grey man. Don't be at the front and don't be at the back. Just keep your nose clean, do what they ask and get stuck in. Don't tell them, no matter what, that your dad was in the Royal Engineers, because there will be Royal Engineers here that are helping with the training, and they may well know me, and you may take a certain amount of stick for being my son. He said, okay, Dad, I'll do that. I'll keep my nose clean and I'll knuckle down and I won't mention you. So fair enough. We got onto this parade square where parents were dropping off their sons, and walking across the parade square in his immaculate best uniform with a chest full of medals and looking very dashing and smart, was one of my oldest mates. I've got into trouble with this fella so many times, and he was now a major, and he was the OC of the training squadron. Well, my name's Martin, but for 30 years in the military, I was called Joe. And he shouted across this square, "Joe, you reprobate," or something equally that I can't repeat. And he turned to Daniel and he said, "Joe, is this little Joe?" I said, what can you do? I said, yeah, it is, Taff. He said, well, don't worry, leave him with me. We'll have a fine time together. Oh, poor old Daniel. Actually, he says he did get a lot of stick, because as well as this major who was in charge of him, there were corporals and so on that were Royal Engineers, and they knew me. But actually, he said, genuinely, Taff did, I won't say his surname, he did look after him, and he thoroughly enjoyed it, and he succeeded, and he went on to a career in the Royal Engineers. Considerably shorter than mine, but it did involve a high-risk search tour of Afghanistan, for which I'm immensely proud of him. So yeah, but yeah, keep your nose clean and don't tell anyone you're in the Royal Engineer. And then comes this bloke that I got into numerous scrapes with. Yeah. Anyway, you know, it's mildly funny, but I've got to knuckle down to this incredibly boring job. But it'll be worth it in June, July, August when they're flowering and looking a picture on the plot. Well, we'll soon find out if it's too early, won't we? Just got to water them. I've labelled them Marigold Keys Orange. And now they're going in the cold frame. Well, I thought I'd do one of my little health clips. And I know those of you who've been around for a while know this, but please excuse me if I just say to anyone who's a new subscriber, and I have had a few, I just, you know, it's not my ramblings, it's taken from books of authority. And I include it, one, because, you know, there's only so much you can do about an allotment. And it just, I hope it promotes thought. And, you know, if you approach what I read with an open mind and then, you know, afterwards just dwell on it and think. I have seen people in my family and immediate circle and myself gain immeasurable health benefits from following the advice of people who aren't in, or they're in the mainstream but they're not given the credit and they're not given the airtime, and it's all poo-pooed, because the medical industry is just that, it's an industry, you know. And I found this hard to get my head round, but slowly I've come to realise that, you know, the reason cancer is still the problem. You know, I mean, Alzheimer's was discovered in 1906. We still cannot treat it in any way, shape or form. We have no cures, nothing. Actually, we do know how to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, but there's no money in it because it's all about the diet you eat, and there's no money in selling broccoli. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from this book called The China Study. Now, if you've looked into nutrition in any way, shape or form, you will have come across T. Colin Campbell and The China Study. It's the gold standard. The study was done decades ago in China, and it was done across hundreds of thousands of people over years. And the findings were unbelievable, and showed that, and other people have done this since, that you can prevent, reverse and cure all the modern diseases that those of us in the West suffer, and they're all caused by our diet and lifestyle. So yeah, I'm just going to read you a little clip, see what you think. It's not very long, and I might read a few more clips as we go through the months, but this is the introduction. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to cut in halfway down the page. Should you buy food that is labelled organic to avoid pesticide exposure? Are environmental chemicals a primary cause of cancer? Or is your health predetermined by the genes you inherited when you were born? Do carbohydrates really make you fat? Should you be more concerned about the total amount of fat you eat, or just saturated fats and trans fats? What vitamins, if any, should you be taking? Do you buy foods that are fortified with extra fibre? Should you eat fish, and if so, how often? Will eating soy food prevent heart disease? My guess is that you're not really sure of the answers to these questions. If this is the case, then you're not alone. Even though information and opinions are plentiful, very few people truly know what they should be doing to improve their health. This isn't because the research hasn't been done, it has. We know an enormous amount about the links between nutrition and health, but the real science has been buried beneath a clutter of irrelevant or even harmful information. Junk science, fad diets and food industry propaganda. interesting that lots of people went onto the Atkins diet a couple of decades ago, and Atkins himself died of heart disease. I want to change that. I want to give you a new framework for understanding nutrition and health. A framework that eliminates confusion, prevents and treats disease, and allows you to live a more fulfilling life. I've been in the system for almost 60 years. He has been at the top of nutritional science for nearly 60 years. And he started out, Dr. Campbell, as a farm boy, growing up, in the farm belt of America. And he was sent to the Philippines because children were malnourished to find out how they could introduce more protein into their diet. And he discovered, he was basically trying to sell meat because he came from a farm, and that's what America wanted to do. Discovered that those children in the Philippines who ate the most meat had the worst disease. So eventually he completely did a 180-degree turn and changed the way he thought about it all. Yeah. Some of the findings published in the most reputable scientific journals show that dietary change can enable diabetic patients to go off their medication. If you listen to what Dr. Campbell says, if you're type 2 diabetic, you can be non-diabetic, no symptoms, asymptomatic in a month at any stage of diabetes. But if you're going to the NHS for your diabetes treatment, it's a slippery slope with medication to manage your symptoms, which is the classic NHS model. Heart disease can be reversed with diet alone, and in so doing, reducing animal protein is more significant than reducing saturated fat. Breast cancer is related to levels of female hormones in the blood, which are determined by the food we eat. Consuming dairy foods can increase the risk of prostate cancer. Antioxidants found in fruits and vegetables are linked to better mental performance in old age. Kidney stones can be prevented by a healthy diet. Type 1 diabetes, one of the most devastating diseases that can befall a child, is convincingly linked to infant feeding practices. He's being very delicate there, but it goes on later in the book to explain. The statistical link between children drinking cow's milk and getting type 1 diabetes is statistically stronger than the link between smoking and lung disease. Now, of course, if you're interested in the health of our children, you would tell people that. Do not give young children cow's milk. It can lead to type 1 diabetes. There is a statistical link. But can you imagine what that would do to the dairy industry? So it's kept quiet, nobody mentions it, and they keep on giving out formula. Anyway, I'll read some more excerpts from it, but I find all that fascinating. One of the most fascinating findings he made, bear with me, it'll be another minute, was that they found in lab mice and rats that what he discovered from the Philippines and the China study was that many of our modern diseases, cancer especially, are linked to protein. Protein was the first ever nutrient discovered, and it's got this mythical attachment in our society. So protein, without protein you die. But here's the fascinating thing. What do we need in the way of protein? Our bodies need between 4 and 7% of their daily calories to be protein. Between 4 and 7%. What food does nature provide us that has between 4 and 7% protein? Funny enough, vegetables. Even potatoes have enough protein in them to sustain human life and to make it thrive. So what they found is they took I can't remember the name of it, but a cancerous chemical, and they injected it into these lab animals, and then they fed them a diet of 5% protein, and the cancer never developed. So they had this cancer-giving carcinogenic chemical in them. They never developed cancer on 5% protein, which is what you get from plants. In others, they upped it to what most Western diets include, which is about 20% of your calories from protein. On a 20% protein diet, they all develop cancer. And and that's what we're eating. If you're eating fish, they say, oh, fish is a leaner meat. Well, it still contains high levels of protein. So anyway, Don't believe me. You know, I mean, I would believe Colin Campbell, the man knows his stuff. But do your own research, look into it. You know, cow's milk for children is a really bad idea. And yeah, protein. You know, all these people taking protein shakes, and you see these adverts on telly for crap foods. You know, added protein, because if it's good for you, more must be better, right? Well, of course, it's not. Anyway, yeah, stay clear of protein. And these protein shakes, utter madness. Madness. Anyway, quite interesting. Right, after bending your ear, I thought I might lighten the mood. Here's some interesting facts, or you can decide for yourself, about men. The average man spends 6 months of his life shaving. Yeah. Here's an interesting one for all those woke idiots. In Old English, man was simply a word for human being, regardless of sex. The word for man was were, as in werewolf, man-wolf. So when people say mankind, that word originated not from men, but from humans. So, you know, all those idiots out there say, oh, we must say mankind, or humankind, or people kind. Yeah, you can, yeah. Oh, I came close to a rant then. Mankind includes all of us. Men have bigger teeth than women and thicker skin. And apparently the thicker skin is not because women insult us all the time, but because of testosterone. Testosterone needs thicker skin to keep it in. Heart attacks. This is funny, and I you know, and no one wants anyone to have a heart attack. But I've told you before about my sense of humour. 30 years in the military, I can laugh at anything, and invariably do. Heart attacks during sex are rare, but when they do occur, most of them happen to men who are cheating on their wives. Yeah, there is some justice in this world. The average man lies to his colleagues, boss or partner 6 times a day, while women do it 3 times. 80% of the males born in Russia, how topical, in 1923, 80% of the males born in Russia in 1923 did not survive World War II. Men in the USA receive an average 63% longer sentences than women for the exact same crimes. That is fascinating. In Switzerland, now I never knew this, in Switzerland every man must attend military training. Bearing in mind, I think Switzerland's a neutral country, isn't it? Must attend military training and is required to keep his rifle afterwards, giving the country one of the highest gun ownership rates in the world. Isn't that fascinating? And yet you never hear of mass shootings in Switzerland. Yeah, excuse me sniffing. This cold's bloody awful. So it's a proper man cold, which is 63% worse than women's colds. Anyway, I hope you found those quite interesting. Well, as is so often the case, I had no grand master plan, but as I'm breaking up that pallet, it's really good quality wood. I thought that would look really good around that bed there. And then I think the strategy of as and when the good wood becomes available, not just ordinary pallets, but the thicker, better quality, I will just keep a rolling program of replacing the wood around the beds, because all these borders, the wooden slats I've got around the borders or the beds, it's all 5 years old. It was all put in originally when I got the plot, so although it seems to be working, it must be rotten underneath. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do with that. I'm going to slowly, I don't know whether I'll finish it today because the weather's awful now, the rain's really set in, but that's a plan. Well, I've got a little bit of mess to clear up from the old wood, but there's a job I wasn't expecting to do. Looks a lot neater, and it'll retain the soil a bit better, stop the chippings spilling into the bed. So I'm very happy, but the weather is god awful now. I'm going in the shed for a cup of coffee, a sit down and read a kitchen garden magazine. I think me and the allotment are finished today. Vegetable soup for lunch, and as the weather forecast predicted, it is absolutely foul out there. However, yeah, I've had a good morning, achieved a fair bit, rather pleased with getting that bed done. I should, just say about the protein stuff, the book, The China Study by T. Colin Campbell and Thomas M. Campbell, father and son, is truly a fantastic read. I should say that I said they did these 5%, 20% protein studies in lab mice and rats. They then, once that was done, they did then do those studies with humans, and the same effect was found. And of course they didn't have to, you're not allowed, the ethics of experiments means you're not allowed to deliberately feed people 20% protein to try and give them cancer, but they didn't have to do that because that's what people eat anyway. So they just studied people who were eating their normal recommended diet, and they got cancer. But there may, people there may be saying, yeah, I agree with everything you've said. Some people may say, I really don't care. And other people might be really upset, because if there's one thing that angers people, it's when you give them bad news about their bad habits. And I don't mean to upset, it's simply done, as I always say, to stimulate thought, debate, and question the established narrative, because the established narrative is how we've got to where we are, fat and sick. So anyway, enough about that. That's me for another week. Yeah, I'll be back in a week's time. I may give next weekend a miss video wise, because until it warms up and the sun eventually comes out, nothing's really moving. The seedlings aren't showing much sign of growth, and the other crops, things like pumpkins and squashes and so on, cucumbers. I'm not sowing at the moment. I don't have the room indoors, and the glass or the greenhouse is just too cold at night. So there is a bit of a stall, it's inevitable. So I may see you in a fortnight. But whenever I'm back, take care, look after yourselves. Bye for now.